Hi guys, we're now in chapter 12, the lymphatic system and body defenses. So this is the first lecture of chapter 12. The first part, we're going to cover the lymphatic system, starting with lymphatic vessels. So this is a quick overview. Without our lymphatic system, our cardiovascular system would stop working, and our immune system would be very impaired. The lymphatic system consists of two semi-independent parts. There is a meandering network of lymphatic vessels. So there's like a bunch of these like lymphatic vessels all over in your body. These transport back to the blood fluids that have escaped from the blood vascular system. And there's also various lymphoid tissues and organs scattered throughout the body. So all of these that are labeled here are all lymphoid organs. So we've got the thymus, the diaphragm, the spleen, the groin, lymphatic vessels, lymph vessels, the axillary lymph nodes. Here we've got neck or cervical lymph nodes here. They house phagocytic cells and lymphocytes, which play essential roles in body defense and resistance to disease. Okay, we're going to start with lymphatic vessels. As blood circulates through the body, there's exchanges of nutrients, waste, gases that occur. We talked about that in the cardiovascular system. And that occurs between the blood and the interstitial fluid. The hydrostatic and osmotic pressures. So hydrostatic pressure, osmotic pressure, this is the interstitial fluid. This is blood flow in an artery. So the hydrostatic and osmotic pressures operating at capillary beds force fluid out of the blood at the arterial ends of the beds and cause most of the expelled fluid to be reabsorbed at the venous ends. So at the arterial ends, fluid is flowing out. At the venous ends, fluid is flowing in. The fluid that remains behind in the tissue spaces becomes part of the interstitial fluid. And this leaked fluid must be carried back to the blood if the vascular system is to have sufficient blood volume to operate properly. It's very vital. If it does not, fluid accumulates in the tissues, producing edema. An excessive edema impairs the ability of tissue cells to make exchanges with the interstitial fluid and blood. That's obviously not a good thing. So the function of the lymphatic vessels is to form an elaborate drainage system that picks up this excess tissue fluid that's called lymph and returns it to the blood. The lymphatic vessels, or lymphatics, form a one-way system, and lymph flows only towards the heart. So they're trying to show you that this is lymph in green here. They give it a different color instead of red and blue. The microscopic blind-ended lymph capillaries, so these are the capillaries in here in green, weave between tissue cells and blood capillaries in the loose connective tissues of the body and absorb the leaked fluid. So lymphatic capillaries are pretty similar to blood capillaries, but they are much more permeable. They do have mini valves that act as a one-way swinging doors. The flaps, they gape open when fluid pressure is high in the interstitial space, and that allows fluid to enter the lymphatic capillary. Proteins, cell debris, bacteria, and viruses enter the lymphatic capillaries easily, and they can use them to travel throughout the body, and that includes cancer cells as well. And that's obviously a problem, right? We don't want cancer cells being able to travel all over our body. This dilemma, though, for at least bacteria and viruses and cell debris, proteins, it's partly resolved by the fact that we have lymph nodes. And the lymph takes detours through these lymph nodes. And in the lymph nodes, so each of these little nodes here, the lymph is cleaned basically cleansed of debris and examined by cells of the immune system. So lymph is transported from the lymph capillaries through successfully larger lymphatic vessels until it's returned to the venous system. And the right lymphatic duct drains the lymph from the right arm and the right side of the head and thorax. So the right lymphatic duct drains the right side, basically. So you can see in green here, that's the right side. Even though it's our left looking at it, remember we're talking about anatomical position. This is the right lymphatic duct here. And the thoracic duct receives lymph from the rest of the body. The thoracic duct is here. Both ducts empty the lymph into the subclavian vein on their own side of the body. Lymphatic vessels are very, very thin-walled, and the larger ones have valves. Lymphatic system is a low-pressure pumpless system, and lymph is transported by the mechanisms that aid venous return, which is the milking action of the skeletal muscles, pressure changes in the thorax during breathing, and contracting smooth muscles in the walls of the larger lymphatics. So here are a couple questions. What is the function of lymphatic vessels? How do lymphatic capillaries and blood capillaries differ structurally from each other? Well, the answer to number 1 is lymphatic vessels pick up fluid and proteins leaked from the blood into the interstitial space. So they pick up the fluid that was leaked out and basically put it back into the bloodstream. Number 2, lymphatic capillaries are blind-ended and not fed by arteries as blood capillaries are. They also have flap-like mini-valves that make them more permeable than blood capillaries. All right, and moving on, we're going to talk a little bit about lymph nodes. So maybe when you guys get sick, at least for me, when I get sick, I start to feel the lymph nodes in my neck start to swell up. It's the weirdest thing. I feel these little things in my neck. They swell up. They kind of hurt, and that's how I know that I'm fighting something. So lymph nodes, they protect the body by removing foreign material such as bacteria and tumor cells from the lymphatic system, by producing lymphocytes that function in the immune system. As lymph is transported towards the heart, it is filtered through thousands of clusters of lymph nodes. And remember, those lymph nodes do the cleaning. Large clusters are found in the inguinal, axillary, and cervical regions of the body. Inguinal means your groin area, axillary armpit area, and cervical is your neck area. Within the lymph nodes are macrophages, and they engulf and destroy bacteria, viruses, and other foreign substances. Collections of lymphocytes, remember lymphocytes are a type of white blood cell, are also in lymph nodes, and they respond to foreign substances in the lymphatic stream. So most of us have swollen glands during an active infection. What are swollen are not actually the glands, but the nodes of the lymphatic system. So when I was talking about how when I get sick, I can feel these nodes in my neck kind of swell up and they hurt. And that's because I am fighting an active infection. Most lymph nodes look like this. They're kind of kidney-shaped. They're less than an inch long, and they're buried in connective tissue. Each node is surrounded by a capsule from which strands called, I'm going to butcher this, trabeculae, extend inward to divide the node into a number of compartments. So there's the cortex, which might sound familiar. Cortex is the outer part of the node. that contains collections of lymphocytes called follicles, many of which have dark centers called germinal centers. So the cortex is the outer part. And phagocytic macrophages are located in the central medulla. Oops, I guess that was a double there. Lymph enters the convex side of a lymph node through afferent lymphatic vessels. And then it flows through a number of sinuses that meander through the lymph node and exit from the node at the hilum via efferent lymphatic vessels. The flow of lymph through the node is very slow. And lymph passes through several nodes before its cleaning process is complete. So the big takeaway from this slide is that lymph flows slowly and it passes through many lymph nodes before it's completely clean. Okay, lymph nodes help rid the body of infectious agents and cancer cells, but they are overwhelmed by the agents they are trying to destroy, and that's why we get swollen lymph nodes. So when a large number of bacteria or viruses are trapped in the nodes become inflamed and tender to the touch. And so that's exactly what happens to me when I get sick. They can also become secondary cancer sites, particularly in cancers that use lymphatic vessels to spread throughout the body. Cancer-infiltrated lymph nodes are swollen, but not painful, so you can distinguish them from those infected by microorganisms. So if you have an infection from bacteria or a virus or something, and your lymph nodes are swollen and they're painful to the touch, it means you're fighting something, you're sick, that sort of thing. But if your lymph nodes are swollen and they're not painful to the touch, that can be a sign of a cancer-infiltrated lymph node. Okay, and that's all we're going to cover today. We'll cover other lymphoid organs starting tomorrow.